Um, so, I'm trying something new tonight that is not playing games. That makes me kind of nervous, but I'm also really excited. Um, so, I've read some really good books this month, so I thought I might try talking about them. Um, so, I guess I'll just jump into it. I don't really know where to start. I don't know what kind of preamble to do, but yeah, we'll just chat, and if anyone pops in and has anything to say, just feel free to share it. I'm super nervous, so I'm sorry if that comes across. But so the first book I read this month was The Night Ends Moon by Piper C.J. So this is the first book in a 4-part adult fantasy series, and it starts with 2 children in an orphanage who then get separated in their teenage years. So the first part kind of focuses on their childhood years, their time in the orphanage, and starts at the time that the younger of the 2 main characters, Amaris, is sold to the orphanage. So from there it kind of follows them as they grow up. As they grow up, they're inseparable, but also kind of isolated from their peers. And then the rest of the book focuses more on like their adult life and I guess the current day. So in the main part of the book, they're 19 and 21. And it's kind of set around the typical, fantasy novel elements. There's a quest. They have to complete it. So the 2 main characters, as I mentioned, are split when they're teenagers. So the older of the 2, Nox, is sold to a brothel, which I'm going to chat about that later. And then the younger Amaris joins a group of church-aligned monster hunters located within a mountain. Again, chat about that later. So it's not a complex novel. It's pretty straightforward, and it has a lot of the elements that young adult fantasy is known for, which I don't mean as a slight. I love young adult fantasy. It's not complex in terms of world building or the prose and the language. So first off, I'll chat about positives, and then I'll chat about a couple of criticisms that I have, and then follow that up with some overall thoughts. So first off, the cover. I love the cover in this series so much. They're just simple, but they're gorgeous. So there's a lot of queer representation. So the main relationship is a bisexual romance. It does feel a bit obsessive and unhealthy at times. I am willing to kind of give it some more time and see how it progresses before I really describe it as toxic or anything. There's also a few other same-sex relationships that get mentioned in it, so it's a pretty established thing in the world. It's an adult fantasy that isn't just smut. Even with one of the main characters being sold to a brothel, the smut is pretty tame compared to kind of similar feeling novels. Not going to mention names. And it's actually quite refreshing to read. I love smut as much as the next person, but it's nice to read something that just isn't horny all the time. So it does feature one of my favourite opening lines that I've read recently and possibly not so recently. So the line is, it's seldom that a sound defines the course of history. I don't know, I just like it. The found family trope features heavily for Amaris, and that is actually one of my favourite tropes of all time. So I love it when, that's a key part of a story. Another positive is Nox. I love her. She's incredible. I want all of the good things for her. She's a good main character. She's a bit morally grey. And Nox, you can do better than Amorous, I promise. In terms of secondary characters, I'm a big fan of Ash, who is part of Amorous's story. It has some cool shadow demon monsters. Always a big fan of a cool monster, so, easy win there. And then one thing that I really liked is that it has a pronunciation guide at the front of the book for the characters, the places, and the monsters. So I think this actually needs to be a thing that happens in more fantasy books. I know some have them on their website or in other locations, but let's be real, I'm not checking that. If I do, I already have an incorrect pronunciation just baked into my brain that I will never deviate from. So put it in the book and I will refer back to it. If it's not in the book, I will not remember. Sorry, I talk with my hands a lot, so deal with that. Okay, so on to the criticisms. There are a few that are particularly egregious and need to be talked about. So, Amorous. I've already talked about Nox, I love her. But Amorous. So while there are two main characters, Amorous is kind of more of the primary main character. She's also really boring and annoying. She's extremely white, with white skin, white hair, white eyebrows, and white eyelashes. She's constantly referred to as Snow White, Moon White, and is nicknamed, Snowflake, and various other kind of nicknames that reference her whiteness. So the constant reminders of how white she is get tiring really quickly. Amorous was supposed to be sold to a brothel, but she leaves Nox behind and joins a group of monster hunters called Reavers. So there is kind of a bit of a point in the book where it said that she's not naturally gifted when it comes to the physical nature of her training. But also, by the time it's over, she's considered one of the best, is consistently beating all the other Reavers when it comes to sparring, even though they have years of training over her. So, is she naturally gifted or is she not? You say one thing, but you're not really showing that. Nox, on the other hand, is a person of colour. According to the author's kind of casting inspiration postings, she's Southeast Asian inspired. She throughout the book she's whipped in the place of Amorous, and is sold to the brothel in the place of Amorous. She's a child when she's sold to the brothel, even if it seems like the math kind of works out that she doesn't take a client until she's about 18. Still. She's also not the only person of colour in the book, but for the first part she is the only one that's explicitly mentioned. She's also hinted at being exotic and having dark magic. She's written with quite a lot of self-loathing about not being able to protect Amorous and about being forced into prostitution, and I don't know, it just feels a bit iffy, and a bit gross. So there is one black character who is otherwise unnamed, and is depicted as a wise, mystical, spiritual woman. She's a priestess of the church in the series. So make of that what you will. I do note that is kind of a stereotype that gets placed on black characters in fantasy stories. So it was kind of disappointing to see it be perpetuated in this. Just going to mention the child trafficking thing again. because it's really gross. Really gross. So I have seen a lot of comments, and I did note this myself, about how Amaris' story is very similar to another, specifically that of Ciri from The Witcher. So I've played most of The Witcher 3 and I'll finish it at some point. But yeah, it did feel recognisable based on that. So like, she's got white hair, she's got a scar over one eye, she's adopted by a grumpy, gravelly voiced monster hunter who names all of his pets one name, who lives in a mountain training fortress for not out hunting monsters. So yeah, the similarities are there. On the world building, it feels really empty, even in like the city locations. It just doesn't feel like there's much going on in the world beyond what the characters are doing. The ending felt really rushed compared to the slower paced middle of the book. I did see a few comments that people found the middle of the book boring, or too slow paced. For most of it, I thought it was fine. For the most part, I liked the pacing. I did find myself wishing that the part about Amaris's training would end just so I could, see what Nox was doing, but the pacing was fine. And then it could have done with more editing, more proofreading, and more sensitivity reading. I do feel like a lot of the issues could have been resolved with more sensitivity reading. Authors, you can have more than one sensitivity reader for each facet of your book. Each reader will pick out different issues. If you're writing things that are not your lived experience, whether that's race, disability, sexuality, gender, anything, please engage sensitivity readers, just to make sure you aren't falling into cliche territory and perpetuating harmful stereotypes. You cannot go wrong with sensitivity readers. With all that said and done, I did like the book. I loved it as I was reading it, but that could be down to absolutely hating the series I was reading before this. I won't mention it by name, but it is listed in my Goodreads. But I think some time and some reflection did temper that a little bit. Look, it was fun to read, and I'll read the rest of the series. I also read the second one, so I'm going to chat about that next. But I do think the issues really need to be said out loud. So, that was The Night That's Moon. If anyone sees this and has read it, I'd really like to know what your thoughts on it were. So, yeah, I guess let me know. So, the next one is The Sun in Its Shade by Piper CJ, which, again, is a sequel. So this is just going to be short because a lot of my criticisms are very similar to The Night That's Moon, so I just won't touch on them again. I will mention that I read this immediately after The Night That's Moon. I did devour it. I read it in 5 hours with a short break for dinner. So, back-to-back reading and very fast reading will, I think, impact the way I felt about it. But the positives, it doubled down on its bisexuality, which was great. Queer representation is really important, and it was great to see it be consistently reinforced as part of who the characters are. And it also introduced a non-traditional relationship. It's not something I have much of a reference for. I felt it did it in a respectful way, but we'll see if, you know, I don't know what actual polyamorous people have said about it, if anything, but I'm just going off what I can, what frame of references I have, which are minimal. So Nox is absolutely still my beloved. If she doesn't end up happy by the end of the series, I will riot. She deserves all of the happiness. And then, while we're discussing Nox, Ash and Malik as her supporting cast are wonderful. I love the three of them together. Ash was already one of my favourites from the first one. Malik didn't really seem to have much of a presence in that one, but this one put him firmly up there as well. And then lastly, the cover again. I just love the white with the bold black lines, and the gold. So far, this one's my favourite. I haven't really looked at the other two. So criticisms, again, more of the same as The Night That's Moon. So won't touch on them, but they're there. There was a pretty obvious plot twist. I felt it was less a good foreshadowing. It was less due to good foreshadowing and more just like knowing genre tropes and cliches and being able to guess what would happen based on that. There is a little bit of a redemption for the child trafficker. It's suggested it's not that bad because of what she did for Nox when she was dropped off at the orphanage. In my opinion, there are certain things that are irredeemable, and trafficking children, especially to brothels and places like that, that's high on that list. Again, overall, I like the series. I have the third one on its way and the fourth pre-ordered, which I'm excited for. So, the third book I read was, let me grab it, was The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. So this is the first in a trilogy inspired by 1001 Nights. So it follows a black market magic seller, Luli Al-Nazari, as well as Mazen, a cowardly prince, and Aisha, a jinn hunter, as the Sultan sends them on a search for an ancient lamp that will kill all of the jinn. So the jinn are a long-lived humanoid race who wield magic, and their blood, when spilled, causes life to bloom in its place. The things that I really liked about it were the setting. It just felt so vibrant and full of life. Even when the characters were trekking through the desert and it was just the four of them, there was no one else around. It had some great characters and relationships between them. So Luli and Kadia, I hope I'm saying that right. Kadia's was so funny at times, and I just adore Mazen. Omar is a really good love-to-hate antagonist. Honestly, fuck Omar, but I can appreciate that he was well written as much as I hate him. The world building was really solid, I thought. Overall, the pacing and the tempo was really good. It switched between like high intensity action scenes and more relaxed scenes really well. And the second half was really engaging. And that was where I really started to enjoy the story. I've only got a couple of criticisms on it, and that was that it was a bit of a slow start. I'm really glad that I stuck with it, but it did take a while to kind of really grab my interest. There were a few, let me see if I can find one. There were a few interlude stories, I guess you'd call them, that I really liked reading them, but they are black text on like a grey parchment background that I did find hard to read. I know that's more of a design criticism than a story criticism though, so I won't hold it against the author. but I do think it is something to note, when designing a book, is that dark ink on a dark background is hard to read. So I'm excited to read the rest of the trilogy. The second book, The Ashfire King, is due to publish next year. So that'll definitely be one to pre-order, I think, once it's got a release date. And I look forward to reading it. Okay, and then the last one I read was The Battle Drum by Saara El-Arifi. Again, I so hope I'm pronouncing this right. I'm so sorry if I'm not. Please correct me. I did my best to kind of Google name pronunciations, but I just ran out of time to do too much digging. So, The Battle Drum is the sequel to The Final Strife, which I read last year, and I really loved it. So this is the second book in the trilogy, and it was probably my most anticipated sequel this year. Due to shipping issues, I did have to wait, because it took ages to arrive, but God, it was so worth it. So the series follows a trio of women, Saara, Anor, and Hassa, all of which are from different blood castes, and it follows them as they deal with the repercussions of centuries of violent colonialism and increasing natural disaster. So they live in a land known as the Empire, which is also known as the Drylands, which is a desert nation in which people are separated by the colour of their blood. So the Red Bloods, known as Embers, are considered the elite. They form the ruling council of the Empire. They're the only ones who have the ability to use their blood to power runes as a kind of magical form of technology, which is known as blood work. The Blue Bloods are known as dusters. They form kind of the working class, ranging from, shop owners to kind of more laborious work in the mines and stuff. So a few of them are forced to work as rippers, who are responsible for punishing dusters and ghostings who commit offences. And then the final caste is the ghostings, who have clear blood. So they're mutilated at birth and forced into slavery. And they're victims of just centuries of systemic oppression. So the Empire is kind of ruled by a two-house governing system. So the first is a council made up of emirs, who are the leaders of the Empire's towns. This is a governing body in name only. The real ruling power lies with the four wardens of strength, duty, truth, and knowledge, which mirror the four kind of duties that the Drylands god, Anyme. Again, I so hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't think I am. But that mirrors the wardens mirror the four duties that the god considers valuable. So the Battle Drum follows on from the events of the Final Strife, in which Saara and Anor compete in an event known as the Aktabar, which is a tournament that decides who will become the next disciple of the Warden of Strength. So the things I loved about the Final Strife were really built on in the Battle Drum. So the covers are a really big selling point for me. These ones are gorgeous. I think this is the UK cover, but God, it's just gorgeous. Look at it. The world building is excellent, and it remained excellent. So the author just has a talent for creating a world that feels so real and fleshed out, and every new piece of lore just felt so considered and thought through. Blood work is a really simple yet effective magic system. So much about it is lost following the colonization of the Drylands. And I think it's a pretty neat reflection on how much knowledge and culture is lost in the aftermath of real-world colonisation. So queer representation. The queer representation in this series is through the roof. Hassa is trans, and not only that, but trans people are widely accepted throughout all of the nations in this world. Hormone herbs and gender-affirming surgery are available for those that can afford it. Many characters use they, them, or a mix of pronouns. And there's actually a list of characters at the end of the books that lists what pronouns each character uses, which I think is just a really great inclusion to have. Same-sex relationships and marriage are also widely accepted. The only limitations on relationships are like segregation of blood colours. Saara and Anor are queer, as are a huge number of minor and supporting characters. The characters feel so well written. They've got flaws, they've got growth, and they've got personalities that just feel like they could be real. I love them. The Battle Drum opened with a short retelling of the events of the final strife, written as if an in-universe storyteller, known as a griot, was telling it, which is a really cool way to do it without just dumping the information in the actual story. And then I thought the pacing and reveals were really well timed. Like I gasped out loud at a few of them, just because I was like, oh, I never considered that. For some of them, clues were just subtly woven in there. So whenever I was like, oh, I was right. It felt really validating. So, yeah, I don't really have any negatives to mention. I love it. Other than, the only criticism is that the third one isn't already out. But I can't wait for it. I think it's going to be an instant pre-order. And she has another, I think, series coming out in the first quarter of next year called Feybound, which I'm also very excited for. I've already pre-ordered that one, so yeah, I can't wait. So those were the books that I read in November. If you are watching this later on YouTube, and you've read any of them, I would really love to hear what your thoughts on them were. I got some books lined up for December that I'm really looking forward to, so I will try and do another one of these. My goal is to chat about books on the last Friday of every month on stream, and then kind of on the first of each month have the video up on YouTube. So we'll see. I love books and I'm very excited to talk about them, so thank you for listening to that. And again, yeah, if you've read any of them, I'd love to hear what your thoughts on them were, and I would also love any suggestions for books, especially if they're by authors of colour or queer authors or authors with disability. I've been trying to diversify my bookshelf, so I'm always down for suggestions. But yeah, thanks for watching. For the stream, I'm going to switch over to some Warhammer painting because I have so many minis that I just haven't painted and they're just sitting there, so if you just bear with me, I'll just move my camera and switch my camera setup so that I can focus on that. So just give me a second.